if you're just joining us, this is Firecrackers, and we're talking about constitution review and policies to make Nigeria better. If you ask, well, learned people, the ones that we would trust when it comes to giving advice, one of the things they will point to that is the problem of Nigeria is our constitution, which they think it's what's shooting us in the foot whenever we make policies, but then the constitution does not really let us see the benefits of all this good things that we're supposed to be benefiting, so to speak. So we also have joining us live from Abuja, Professor Sam Erigo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Firecrackers.
Thank you for having me, and good evening, viewers.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. But first, let me begin with my guest here in the studio. Now that the National Assembly is dedicated to once again review our constitution, and then they've promised that by December 2025, we would probably have a finished product, a finished outlook on the constitution that are supposed to be people-friendly. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's become a ritual, a kind of ritual, that every passing Senate, I believe this is the 10th Senate, I believe, every other Senate wants to come up with something to do around the amendment of the Constitution. Nigerians have believed, many people have clamored for this amendment. But for me as a person, I don't know how much more we can go about amending and amending and amending. Some will say, yes, it's necessary to bring our national life and our nation into line or in line with the realities of governance today as we see them. But I will, for one, or for me, I will have called for a brand new constitution whereby Nigerians can really sit down around the table and say how they want to be governed. What we are running today is the constitution that was given to us by the regime of Major General Abdulsalam Abubakar when he exited office in the year 1999, which was what brought in Chief Olusegun Obasanjo in the current dispensation we are enjoying. And no Nigerians didn't sit down to bring out that document. We all know that the military fiat sat together, brought in a few men, and they came up. Of course, we had the 1979 Constitution, which was suspended, parts of which were suspended under the military. So that was, to a very great extent, brought back with a few other additions. And if you ask me, is it representative of the wishes of people in Nigeria today? I would say no. Others can have their view. So in the efforts, why not discounting the efforts of the current assembly towards this amendment? I will also want Nigerians to look beyond these periodic or occasional amendments and say, how do we need to harmonize the potentials of Nigerians and Nigeria as a country? We say unity in diversity, but if you see what goes on every time we have a new government, that diversity is sometimes exploited to the disadvantage of the progress of the country. And I, for one, will say, let's look beyond just getting this constitution constantly amended and see whether we can tinker out something new, something that will speak to our differences, but at the same time bring us together. Whereby a lot of people, and I, for one, I want to believe and agree with federalism in the sense of let's the federating units in Nigeria, whether you call them states or you regionalize them, let them have a lot more say in how to govern. We have homogeneity among regions in terms of languages, in terms of culture. We can work around that. We had it, of course, in the First Republic. And Nigeria had that positive and healthy competition. We had the eastern, the western, the northern regions. And this is how I believe we have to look beyond. For me, we have to look beyond what we are doing. We are trying to patch up a document. They are trying to patch what is leaking. How is governance today beneficial to the average Nigerian? Why do we concentrate the power of the nation in the center? And then we have the police. Okay? The president, of course, has spoken about the state police recently. That should be part of what will come to be in the current amendment. But you see that in so many other organs and agencies, whereby someone out there in Abuja speaks, and this is what, cascades down to the other states and the other parts of that organization. Sometimes, and most of the time, this is heavy on the country in terms of cost, in terms of no tangible progress, in terms of touching the lives of the very people that we believe the nation is existing for. Okay? So I want to repeat before I stop that, yes, they have come together again to begin something new. You can't say they should not do it, but I'm going to be standing on the ground that let's look out for a way to make things work better.
Okay, all right. So despite the fact that you do not 100% agree with constitution review, rather a constitution overall, so to speak, you've mentioned changes that you'd like to see to include true federalism and state police. So now let us ask Professor Sam Irigo-San, what changes would you like to see in the constitution amendment that the National Assembly is about to embark upon?
My colleague there, but this appears. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay.
please go on.
I agree that there is always need for an autonomous constitution, as constitutional lawyers will want to say it. But the challenge we have at present is how to get the people, the Nigerian people, the different peoples of Nigeria to come to a round table to agree on a constitution. So in the meantime, probably we'll keep managing what we have by constant reviews of the constitution, so that each National Assembly will want to have their own bite. It has not led us anywhere, but they should keep doing it. So one of those policies that we think will be necessary now will include one, issue of true federalism, taking into consideration the diversity of Nigeria as a country. That's a critical point. We must address this diversity by making the federal units truly federal states. That is one. Of course, that will affect the issue of things like state police, which must be properly articulated. It's not just enough talking about state police. It has to be properly articulated, taking into consideration the challenges we've seen so far about some of these state-based security agencies. That is one. Second one is that we need to have complete separation of powers. What we have in this situation in Nigeria now is where the executive arm of government appears to be in control, in firm control, and they dish out to the other arms what they want them to have. If you check now, you see that the legislature in Nigeria, both at the federal and state levels, are not independent. The worst of it all is the judiciary. You find out that the judiciary is so much under pressure from the other arms of government. So there is need for true federalism. There is need for complete separation of powers. Then we'll move down to the issue of rule of law. Rule of law appears to have failed in Nigeria. So these are issues and challenges facing us as we speak.
Let us look at another issue that seems to be causing headache in Nigeria, because Nigeria is one of the top 10 exporters of crude oil in the country, but yet the country has not much to show for it. And then we also have one part in our constitution that seems to be causing that problem. That is the Mineral Act. that despite the fact that even if crude oil is found on my property, it is ultimately going to be controlled by the federal government. So going forward, do you think that it might be beneficial if the Mineral Act, it gets amended to include for the control should to be for the state rather than the federal government? So perhaps each region will be able to focus on their own mineral resources, and then each state will be able to develop well. What do you think about that?
That's exactly why I'm talking about true federalism. True federalism, of course, should include factors like the states harnessing their resources, growing to their full potentials, and then contributing to the federal boss. So it has nothing specifically to do with mineral. It has to do with true federalism, which will confer on the federating units their full powers for full potentials. Then that way they will contribute to the federal boss. That way the pressure to be president will automatically be doused, because everybody will know that these things have to come from the
What are your thoughts on it? Do you feel it's high time that we give states the power to decide on how they want to use their mineral resources, or should this still be something that should be controlled by the federal government?
I can't agree more with the learned professor and senior advocate. The Mineral Act is a product. It follows the Constitution. So if we don't amend the Constitution in such a way that true federalism, and that includes fiscal federalism, it's a situation where these federating units can generate income, they can source for resources, can take hold of what is naturally existing in their environment. Call it oil, the Mineral Act, call it anything. This is a God-given product we found in our land. In the south, you have the oil. In the north, you have the gold. You have the tin in Plateau. Now, we can take hold of this and agree in such a way that part of what comes from this will go to the center. Just like the learned professor said, yes, this is the reason why we have the snatch it, kill, and run with it mentality we see today in politics, especially for the presidency. By the time you're going to be president and you see that what you're trying to grab is not there because of what we get from oil and how oil, which is supposed to be a blessing, is now turning to become almost a curse. Of course, there have been researches all over the place in the international community, how it has turned to be a resource curse, which is the mineral resources we enjoy in Nigeria, we're supposed to enjoy in Nigeria. So if we are truly going to get it right, the Constitution should include true federalism. And fiscal federalism is a part of true federalism. So the Mineral Act will be a natural, it will take a natural amendment, but the Constitution must recognize it first and say, yes, whatever you can mine or whatever you see naturally occurring in where you are, it belongs to you, but then you now make some exceptions. You have it not just, and as a matter of fact, if that is not part of the amendment, if we're going to run through federalism, then states also will not be able to manage those resources to take up those duties and responsibilities that they are supposed to take up and fulfill the governance code they have with the people.
Okay, all right. And that one of the belief of the people is that the reason corruption is, it's seeming like a free ball game, that everyone, a lot of people in politics participate actively in it, is because our constitution have not necessarily cater for stiffer punishment for people who are caught in corrupt practices, because we have examples of people it has been alleged that they were involved in one or two things like money laundering, corruption, but then we see them being recycled again into office. So what do you think we can do in that aspect in making sure that our constitution too caters to stiffer punishment for people in government who are caught being corrupt?
The constitution is not going to provide an answer to every question. The constitution, just the way we call it, is, we call it the ground norm. That is the basic, the foundational document which the nation is built upon. Every other law draws from it. Okay? I'm talking about corruption. I think it was in 2003 or so that EFCC came to be under Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. Now it has stayed on from then till now. It's an agency that's supposed to fight corruption. One thing you have to know about Nigeria, which is very important, is to a great extent our problem is not that of laws or adequacy of laws. The problem you see has to do with implementation of those laws. Of course, we can do with some tinkering with those laws. But a situation where you have clear cases of corruption known to everybody, and someone somewhere interferes. Look at what he's talking about, the executive, for example. That the executive, I mean the learned professor that just spoke. Yes, you're talking of separation of powers. You have to work it out in such a way that the executive cannot take everything. Now dictate to the legislature, dictate to the judiciary, and dictate to everybody. And in that light, you see this issue of fight against corruption, or war, which I don't see any war going on. You talked of recycling people, oh sure. Because when these men, you know that you have document, forensic analysis can come up and get the things they did, money laundering and all that. But someone somewhere interferes and says no. Because part of the duty was used in one way or the other to fund the elections. How do you think we can come out from that cul-de-sac? It's going to be a big problem. In my recent broadcast I had, in my weekly criminal justice focus, I mentioned this angle of fighting corruption from the angle that even the EFCC Act can be amended. And I brought in the issue of, one, the EFCC board. We have to find a way whereby the president is not, and they see the problem in Nigeria, like the professor also hinted, is a situation where even the executive teleguides the legislature. That is not separation. But my suggestion there was the board of the EFCC should be made up of men and women of integrity. They are there. We know them. We know quite a number of them. If they are called to serve and they come in, you have them among the Femi Falanas of this world, the Patotomis of this world. The women are there. And you have this board that comes together. And then the board, decide who the chairman, executive chairman is going to be. Then, automatically, in a way, the hand of the government is no longer there. Of course, we have the operatives who could still come up with all manner of things. But this is an example. I just came up with that amongst other suggestions to really deal with corruption. But even the EFCC Act, the way it is now, is not a document, it's not an act, it's not bereft of sound reasoning. It's just that who are going to implement that law. You catch a person today, or you get someone you suspect, you bring him in, and you open the file. There is the journalists, the TV stations carry it. So person has been arrested for 500 million naira. The next 3, 4, 5 weeks, how far? Nigerians don't know what next is going on. So that is the angle. I believe that the Constitution, of course, lawyers will always tell you there's an extent to what Constitution can provide, but every other thing will draw from it. Other laws, we have so many thousands of laws in Nigeria, and anyone that is inconsistent with the Constitution is void. Okay, so we make these laws, then we look at the laws, and these laws are not actually what the entire, to amend the Constitution, all the House of Assemblies in Nigeria are involved. But to amend the law, it's only the reps and the Senate. Like the EFCC Act, they can come up with amendments, suggestions, and then tinker with it. So in that angle, I must tell you, the implementation, the way we interfere, the rule of law he was also talking about. This is where the issue is. And you say it in your mouth that corruption is, we are going to deal with corruption. On the other hand, you are interfering with the agency's operations. How can you deal with corruption? You go out there, you bring in a person who everybody knows that this man, how did he handle the state when he was a governor? How did he handle so agency when he was head? How did he handle so ministerial position when he was there? But today, you see him telling us what we should do. It makes people lose faith in the nation as an entity. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't inspire confidence. You don't tell people to tighten their belts. Why we are looking at the people who join to make things difficult for us again in those situations, and nothing is being done about it. It doesn't inspire confidence. And that's part of the reason we are saying true federalism will weaken the center. Not for the sake of weakening, but the truth is it will empower the federating units to go out there. Okay, look at a state like Abia State that got a new governor last year, May. For the past 4 years, Abia State has been like a state in darkness. Of course, there have been the geometric power work that has been going on for years, but which was just recently launched and that came online fully, giving about 7 or 9 local governments 24-hour uninterrupted power. Now, that state has been in not just physical darkness, but in the terms of darkness of development. And within the 10 months or so, the new governor came in. I am not from Abia, so I can't say I'm trying to blow the trumpet of my state. But we read on papers, we have some people who are friends there, we have colleagues, professional colleagues there, and they are saying that it is Uhuru. Or even if it's not yet Uhuru, it is better than we used to see it. If a state who receives IGR from monthly allocation from the federal government, and then perhaps part of their NDD, part of their derivation, 13% oil derivation, being an oil producing state, can within 10 months galvanize and do the kind of things they are doing, how much more can we do? One, if the right people get into office. And two, if these federating units are allowed to make more use of what comes out from their states or region, depending on what name we'll call that federating unit. Don't you think life will be a lot better? Free education that the Yorubas enjoyed under Chief Awolowo. How was it funded? The cocoa pyramids, the cocoa house standing there today in Ibadan, how was it built? It was from the resources gathered from the Western region that made the sage, Chief Awolowo, part of what the action group, part of their manifesto in action group and part of their policy directive that if we win an election, everyone is going to, every child will go to school, every child will have free education. Not just going to school, you will go to school free. And if if that kind of policy and practice continue, this school feeding we have today, whereby we hear that 1 trillion naira has gone into feeding, but we don't even know who it fed. Such things will have continued. And you will see that these children come home and say, Mommy, we ate today, I don't need to eat. We ate twice in school. And tell me who will not go to school. But today, what do we see? We see out of school children. Some of these beautiful policies. So we need to tinker with our constitution. We need to tinker with ourselves, if possible. But come out with something that at the end of the day, the man on the street will not wake up and be thinking, how do I eat food today? How do I take care of my family? That is just the truth.
All right, definitely. Thank you very much for that. And now back to Professor Sam Erugo. How do you think we could amend our constitution to prevent corruption in Nigeria, so to speak? Because if you are to compare with other plans, let's use some countries in Asia, for example, if they catch politicians or people in government being corrupt, the punishment is so stiff that sometimes they go from killing the person and also extend to some of their family members who might also be beneficiaries of the ill-gotten wealth. So what do you think we can do in Nigeria to make sure that our constitution too caters for these corrupt practices and making sure that we nip it in the bud?
Well, like my colleague just said, the, not the constitution when it comes to fighting corruption. And we need to complete separation, with sharing, particularly in the against corruption, to fight corruption in Nigeria. They said with those in power and recycle corrupt politicians in government. So we can do it. Add value, the direction, but those the presidency down to the and through corruption, the more it is difficult to fight. If you ask me now, it's becoming more and more difficult fighting even the sense. So if it's possible to get those looking like sense in Nigeria to be at the helm of affairs, probably what to do with value has to of our people. So we should think more of ethics now because of fight corruption. If
Right,
I remember very well, the immediate President Buhari power 10 years ago, corruption will kill Nigeria. And the man, the corruption in every aspect of my life. That's government.
All right, thank you very much for that. So